All right, we are broadcasting, we're recording all the things. June 2021. We already got our pandemic talk out of the way, so let's talk about tech stuff. Um, Actually, speaking of tech stuff, I have two unrelated stories that are related to me in some interesting way. One is I have this nice monitor that has a built-in hub and all the things, and you can use it as a KVM switch. And this computer that I'm on right now is my personal machine, and it has been giving me fits of just like dropping the external mic and the camera shutting off and all this weird stuff. And I've reinstalled it from scratch and done all the things, but also hooked up to this same monitor over USB is my work machine. And that's been, no problem. And so it's like all the same equipment works great with one, not the other. And after doing all these things with my personal machine of reinstalling and zapping PRAM and all this stuff for NVRAM, finally thought, like, I wonder if I could hook that one up by USB-C and swap the other one to USB-A. And man, it's like a new machine. And the strange thing is the work machine now still operates fine. So I'll mention the tie-in to that in a second. The other story is about a month and a half ago, I dropped cable as my ISP. I picked up Verizon Fios. And it's been going okay until this weekend, and Fios just gave up the ghost and no service at all. So there's a Fios app. You go to the Fios app and it says, try unplugging this thing and resetting that thing. And we're running some tests. We can't figure it out. Call this number. So you call the number and they lead you through all the same stuff. There's an automated voice that leads you through all the same stuff. Hey, we see you're calling from this number. You're having a problem. We'll try to help. We're running tests. We can't help you. Let's pass you over to a person. So I get a person who runs me through all the same tests, which that sequence is enormously frustrating right there. But one of the things the support person had me do or asked me to do was, and this was towards the end of the call and I was already really frustrated. It was like, hey, take the modem. Fios calls it an ONT if anyone is a Fios customer. Unplug it and try it in a different outlet. I said, power outlet? They say, yeah, try a different power outlet. I said, no, it has power. Power's not the problem. But then I thought, you know what? I've been at this long enough and thinking of my experience with this monitor that I can't explain. I've seen stranger things, so I'll humor you. I'll plug it into a different outlet. And that didn't solve it. But I think my experience with tech lately has just revolved around well, I've seen stranger things, so it's worth a shot. The epilogue to my story is because Verizon said they were going to take so long to fix this, Monday morning when they opened, I ran back up to my cable provider's store and said, hey, I want to sign up for internet access. They handed me a cable modem. I brought it home, plugged it in, done. Verizon's showing up tomorrow to fix the problem. So I think I'll be back on Verizon. I want to kick them out the door, but I've had a noticeably better experience on Fios, I have to say. So I'll probably stick with that until the third strike, and then 3 strikes, you're out. I'll have to figure something else out. Anyway, it is WWDC, and actually speaking with Henry, sort of end of last month, you pointed out that we were going to overlap with WWDC week, and hey, we should just have a chat and talk about the things that have been released. So that's what we're doing. No special focus. So I will let someone else tell me what they thought was interesting from WWDC that they've seen announced so far. I know we have more sessions to go, but...
So I don't know if this was announced today, but I took a screenshot of my terminal app. I opened it in preview, and I was able to select all the text. and it like blew my mind. It's like there's
Oh, they're
voice
including.
recognition is built into everything
Yeah,
on M1 devices. I don't think it's active on Intel. I think it's M1 only because I told my coworker he can make it do that. But it's like
My
Yeah.
mind is now blown.
Yeah, I think that's selective, right? Like, it's really interesting when people say like, "Oh, look at all the devices, Mac OS will run on or iOS." I don't know how different Mac OS gets. Like, I remember early on with Mac OS, you used to have a fairly different experience. Like if you had a Quartz enabled machine, right? Like versus like hardware accelerated Quartz versus an older machine. But iOS, like you can install iOS 14 or 15, but the older your device gets, like the more features you start to miss. And like I have a bunch of test phones, and the first test phone I always reach for is my iPhone 7. So I installed iOS 15 on that, and it runs great, but no text recognition. So that device is clearly like too old to deal with that, or they're doing it in some way like on some core that does this processing that the 7 doesn't have. It looks to me like right now the 10s or XS with iPhone, I don't know how they pronounce the X, has the A12 Bionic chip, and that looks like the bottom line right now of the device that supports all of iOS 15's features. That's what it looks like to me. I mean, maybe minus LiDAR or some hardware component it doesn't have, but I think that'll do all the text recognition stuff. But that's impressive.
Yeah, I used to use VMware Fusion for all my testing of various workflows and things. And at some point after Apple released the T2 devices, I realized that there's too many bugs that you only catch on real hardware. So I sort of switched to only testing with having, an Intel Mac and a T2 Mac and testing those.
Yeah, that's definitely smart. And I remember asking about setting up VMs a while ago, and you replied that you were, and I love the phrase, like, I'm happily VM free for 2 months now.
Yeah, I mean, it also coincided with me starting a new job where, I have a stack of MacBooks on my desk that came for free, which wasn't possible in the past. But I'm lucky not to have to convince somebody to give me, the latest model of whatever hardware.
Yeah, and I think, well, I was going to say I think that's probably important for the M1s, but that's actually one of the interesting things that I think we saw announced at WWDC was this virtualization, and specifically enabling Mac OS guest virtualization on M1s.
Was there an announcement about it? Like, I only saw references to an API. I didn't see anyone talk about what it meant.
No, I haven't either, but it's in the APIs, and there's more info in some of the SDK headers, sort of around like, yes, we will virtualize Mac OS and Linux. So that's kind of promising, but yeah, I definitely agree with you, Victor, that like real hardware tops everything else, right? Like if you could have real hardware, particularly now, that was the other nice announcement, right? Erase and install. So we should get back to some base level pretty quickly to try again. Like, oh, that didn't work the way I wanted. Erase and install. I miss if that is every machine. Is that?
It's T2 and Apple Silicon, as far as I know.
Yeah.
And which is great on T2 because you may have one flying around, and this gets a good repurpose to be, a bare metal VM kind of purpose, what a VM was doing before. But yeah, following the advice of Victor, don't do VMs, do real hardware, just to catch the nasty ones.
Yeah, I mean the way it's introduced right now is a little bit buggy. I tried it, and I ended up at a login screen with no users on the machine. But that should get fixed in the next seed. And also, they're the presentation they gave said that the erase device command is supposed to respect and erase the content and settings, not the entire drive. So what's going to happen sometimes in the beta cycle when Apple gets through all of these bugs is we're going to be able to, on an Ethernet connected Mac Mini or a device in a lab or somewhere, we could go through a cycle where DP auto advances through all the stages, and you do whatever with the Mac, and then you erase it, and you get back to that setup assistant and auto advance in a very quick iteration. So you could
integrate.
You could test like your provisioning flow or something, and it should be completely automated and work.
Yeah, that's nice. That's kind of like, that's the goal, right? That's really nice. Yeah, I had something in my head that related to that, along with announcements. I forget. I'll get back to it. Anyone see any good security announcements? I know some of the sessions are still upcoming, but
I think that the system extension handling is a bit better and improved. That one, I think it's very important that you know, if the system extension is installed and got blocked before, and now you install the profile afterwards, it activates it and brings it to the state which is the desired state, and you don't have to fight with the sequencing as it's for now in certain edge cases.
Didn't that get resolved in like 11.3 or something? I think that's resolved already.
Could be there. I think there's one more change in regards to the system extensions, but yeah.
Well,
I don't know.
One exciting change to system extensions is you can now uninstall them by with no user notification or anything. You can just, hey, you can actually be an admin and go remove this thing that you installed, right? Like, that's the nice thing about, I don't know, the tick-tock cycle of, innovation and then polish. Like, the innovation is always really exciting, but like, in my opinion, like, Big Sur was kind of a train wreck. Like, so much promise, but so little polished. And of course, there were things to announce. Apple always has to have something to announce, but now we're coming along and like polishing and improving the stuff that they promised would work last year, or talked about working. Like system extensions, great, get people out of the kernel, all those things, but with no way to manage them, or confusing dialogues for end users. Like, oh man, what a mess.
Yeah. Speaking of things that they keep promising is OS updates. It looks like they finally added enforcement. So you will be able to tell your users, if you don't install the next patch by this date, your Mac will automatically reboot. And they even added some user notifications that tell you, how many deferrals you have left, and so on. So it's closer to what Monkey always had with force install by date.
Right. I think it's a good step in the right direction. I'm not confident that it will yet be able to replace nudge or our other mechanisms that we might use to nag people into updating.
I think it's still respecting do not disturb, which is a concern for this case, but we're not going to convince Apple of that.
Yeah, that's not a terrible thing. Like, I could see someone being in do not disturb mode, but like as soon as they come out, they get the pop up.
But they have to come out. Like, I have do not disturb on 24/7, and I just got fed up with some notification after a bug, and I've never got back to it. And I have zero value in notifications on my Mac. So
yeah, that's interesting. But I think that's a bit more of an edge case, because isn't do not disturb one of those things that, like, if you toggle it on, the system kind of says like, oh great, we'll put you in do not disturb mode, like until tomorrow, or like a few hours. Like there's some time limit where it automatically comes back out. So yes, you can do some work to make it roughly 24/7, but I think that's kind of the edge case. And maybe for that we'll need to resort to other messaging, right? Like you have this long tail of people that now you're also going to chase down via email or Slack or whatever other way you have to communicate with them.
Yeah, the way we've built our version of an app like Nudge is to have those notifications show up only much later than the Apple default ones. So that gives the user enough time to never see this app, so it's a last resort service.
Yeah. That's a good idea. Yeah. And then of course you can bring out the big gun, like rebooting or something, or doing something a little bit more portable over time.
Yeah.
So you were speaking. You brought up software updates, and I think like a really curious thing is that now they're saying they're going to keep releasing security updates for iOS 14 for some period of time, and like we saw the basis of this in I think like a couple minor versions ago of iOS 14, where like if you were in betas, it would say like also available. And then you would like go select it, and I was like, "That's really weird." But like, it's very odd. I don't really understand why they're doing this. Like, is it? And it doesn't seem like it's really like an enterprise or like school focused thing. Maybe it is, but like when iOS 15 comes out, what's it going to look like for the consumer? Is it going to be like, is that going to be the also available thing and you can choose? And how long do you get to choose for? Like, why are they doing this? So I thought this was very interesting.
Well, maybe I don't know. Like it does help the use case where someone's going to stay on a version for whatever reason. Like if the only choice was going to the newer version, like you can ignore those for forever. And, that's the experiment I always sort of run of like people not in the tech world. Like I love looking at people's phones and seeing like how many things are badged up and like how far behind are they? And like people ignore this stuff all the time. So like maybe if it made it easier to like, okay, we're at least patching up. And then like we're so far into the 15 cycle that we're finally going to say like your only option is to move to 15, but things are so solid by then. Maybe, I don't know. I agree with you. It seems sort of odd, particularly
like in the Mac OS world, we've been like fighting against like N-1 and N-2 and all this nonsense for forever, and now it goes into iOS.
I agree. That's
it's not like Android where like they give it out to a bunch of OEMs and then they do their customizations. It's like every device that supports iOS 14 is going to support iOS 15. Even like the iPad Air 2, which is like from 2014, which is like super cool that they're supporting that still. But like, it's not like there's this disparity where you might want to like they have some unsupported devices. Like I could see that if you have like a large school deployment or something where like you have a bunch of iPads that aren't going to get updated for a while and you want to have them all at the same time. But like, I don't know, this is just super bizarre.
Yeah, I agree. And you mentioned the N-1. Like, I think Apple has even like trained me to get to the point of like, to me, N-1 doesn't even exist. Like, I consider there's no support for N-1. Like, you better be on the latest. Otherwise, you don't know what you're getting in terms of patches. Like, some might be backported. Eventually,
that's the strategy we follow, is that everything gets updated within a reasonable amount of time. And yeah, there might be bugs, but there were bugs in the old thing too. So the only way, you're fully patched is to run the latest thing.
Yeah, totally.
So I really hope that Apple is able to like at least tell somewhat of a story of like why they did this, so that we can, when iOS 15 comes out, we can tell our users properly why they need to run 15 and why 14 dot whatever is just not acceptable.
That's an interesting thing that you bring up, and if you can say, like, do you have a large iOS deployment that you manage?
No.
Okay, but you manage some.
Like people use their phones for work stuff, and we require them to be up to date. As simple as that.
Via
various methods, but basically, if you don't update your block, you're not able to access things with that device anymore.
Yeah. I mean, yes, I'm in the same position that they're not managed via MDM.
And these may have MDM on them, but we're not going to use the like force update stuff. It's more of you need to do this or else.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. We're not using user enrollment because user enrollment isn't ready for prime time yet. But we're like following what user enrollment would be able to do.
Yeah, I think that's roughly the same that I'm dealing with. Like, no, they're not in MDM per se, but you need to install a profile that can enforce a few things and do some checks. And if it's not up to date, like, you can't get your mail and you can't get some basic things without a profile at all. I think the only real thing you can do is Slack, which is kind of useful. And some people choose to do that. Like, I don't want any profile, any extra anything on my personal device, so I'm going to live with this sort of like cordon set of apps or connectivity. Okay, fine. Like, you still have your Corp issued Mac or Chromebook or whatever, and you can do all the other things, that way. But yeah, that's a good question. Like, am I going to be worried about setting iOS 15 as the minimum? If they're updating 14, probably not for a while.
It says in the docs there, it's like that to receive full security updates, you will need to run the latest thing. It's like critical or like some select security updates or something will come to the old version. I don't remember what it says exactly in the docs, but it is clear in there that to receive full, you need to run the latest, which we know. But I guess my real question is just like, what is it going to look like to the consumer when they go to that software update screen in September or whatever this comes out?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
are they going to release like an updated iOS 14 and iOS 15 on the same day? And which one's the default?
Yeah, good point. Like, I'm trying to remember if it's like on Mac OS. I think it's if you're on a seed, right? Like, sometimes they bury it in like the update software update pref pane, right? Where it's like, hey, this big update's available for you, and by the way, there are these other updates that you can install too, right? Like, oh yeah, like Safari, blah blah blah. Whereas the big update would get all of that and more, but you might not be ready to move to that. So like, hey, we're letting you know you can also do this, but we're not making it really prominent. And maybe that's how they'll handle it. I don't know. I agree.
I'm pretty sure most of our Big Sur users are Big Sur users because it's hard to find the Catalina patch because we just tell them, update. We don't tell them to update the specific version. And, eventually we're like, yeah, you have to update the Big Sur, but that happens much later. And we saw a big adoption of Big Sur because nobody knows that there's a Catalina patch. But to Sam's point, I think we're a little bit myopic in that, we're in a specific industry where it's okay to tell people to be on latest, and there's much more heavily regulated environments that use iPads a lot. Like, they're in airplanes and whatnot. And like, those are probably the target customers Apple is, doing these features for.
Yeah, quite possibly. That makes a lot of sense. Like, I think Henry and I have spoken about this in the past, like in recording studios. Like, if you're running Pro Tools, or way back in the day, if you're running an Avid editing rig, like Avid would sell you the Mac and all the guts and like the approved OS version and everything. And even if Apple came out with a new version of the OS, Avid was not going to support you if you went off and updated. Like, it was a system. Like, the specific version of Avid was sort of like locked to the specific OS it was running on, and like that's all they would support. Same thing with Pro Tools usually. Like, you're running this as this bigger system, and they're all connected to the internet now, so you probably want them patched up. So,
yeah, but as far as I know, with Pro Tools at least, they're still doing it. So that you have to wait for almost a half a year until they update their drivers and have done all the tests. It's still in the few people who are left over at Avid that are from the former Pro Tools team. I think that's not many anymore. However, they still follow those old paradigm from back in the past.
Well, it's not Flight where you're dealing with people's lives necessarily, but like, you're still running a business on it, and it's really easy for an end user to just sort of like, oh, I'm getting a pop-up that says update. Yeah, the latest thing. Let me update, and then breaks everything, and now you're in a panic of like, oh, well, I have these clients coming in that I need to do this editing work for, or you're on time schedule. So, in a lot of ways that makes sense. So I think Victor brings up a really good point, particularly around some of the areas that Apple has tried to get iOS devices into, whether that's Flight or hospitals or retail stores or whatever. You're running a business on it. Like, you might not understand the security implications, but to you, like, it ain't broke. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like, don't touch.
Yeah, but in the music industry, especially as Apple has still Logic, and Logic is so successful, and it's on the latest and greatest, so this pushes the others in the industry to at least follow up. So Native Instruments and the others they have a harder time, of course, but eventually they get there within half a year.
That's an interesting viewpoint, but for a different chat. Whereas, like, Pro Tools is still pretty dominant for audio engineering in the US. Like, people who run Logic on their laptop and do all the creative stuff. You go into a studio, it's all Pro Tools. Anyway, we have a security session coming up around password and WebAuthn. I'm really interested to see the contents of that. I guess I'm more interested in some of the details because.
Yeah, there's some very interesting things in there. I've been reading the docs about how the platform authenticator is going to roam via your iCloud keychain, which I think is kind of how users expect it to work. And we haven't really seen much adoption in the real world of platform authentication with WebAuthn yet. Like,
right.
I think I've seen it on like eBay and maybe like PayPal now, but it's really just to like be like, hey, remember my session. It's not like your primary authenticator. So I think that's very interesting. But there's other APIs that are coming out, like to use WebAuthn like in your own app.
Yes.
But I'm not sure like how. Like, I think that's just more kind of an extension of like sign in with Apple, but like not really sign in with Apple. That's just how it feels like to me. It's not like your platform authenticator is actually going to be usable in Chrome or another browser yet, like it is on Windows. Like, they're not taking over the platform auth yet.
Like Windows Hello.
Yeah, like on Windows, if you open Chrome and you go to use U2F or WebAuthn, the system takes that completely over.
Right.
And I would like to see that on the Mac, but we just don't have that right now. And I was hoping that that's what those APIs look like, but it relies on like the well-known, like known site stuff. So it has to be tied between your app and the own site. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think I haven't dug into the docs, but I think they did say like it was specifically for Safari and apps. Like Chrome could tie into it.
It's like Chrome could use it, but only for Google.com.
Yeah, what?
Because it has to. So like the app has to be associated with the site. It's like
Oh, yeah.
yeah, it's more for like a banking app.
Right. Yes. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's, I don't know. We'll see. Like that's the thing with Apple. Like they move incredibly slowly. Right? Like this might be setting the stage for a system-wide platform authenticator like you're hoping for, but like it could be 3 years before we see that materialize.
Though I think it's fine because like really what I want to see out of this is more adoption of WebAuthn, and I think it really helps because like I think, you know, obviously most users who are using Apple products aren't using a Mac, they're using iOS or they're using iPad OS.
Mhm.
And if they have both of those and they have roaming authenticators, like it's going to be much more useful and much more like likely for websites to adopt it.
Yeah.
It's building, you know, it's building the snowball into like something that's going to actually become big. Right now it's like, you know, it's a very niche thing to actually be using WebAuthn, unfortunately.
Yeah, you're right, and that's unfortunate. I'm trying to think of like really big notable examples, but you're right, there are probably very few.
Like I think that WebAuthn use that you see today is mostly just like as a second factor. It's not as your primary authenticator.
Oh yeah, yes, because WebAuthn can be a single strong
Yeah.
authenticator. Yeah.
And there's attestation and all this cool stuff built into Apple's implementation, but nobody's really using that yet that I've seen.
Right.
I want to use it, but I think it's going to be it's going to be a couple more years before we really see like normal people using this.
Yeah, I agree. I want to get to the point where I get to a website and, you know, Face ID or Touch ID or something, you know, authenticates me, boom, done.
Yeah, if you only have one device, like all that, you could implement it today, but like people have more than one device and it's the whole chain of everything. And I think Apple's going to help with that with this syncing in the keychain. Like I see, you know, my normal family members using like the site specific passwords in like iCloud keychain where it's randomly generating passwords. Like real normal people are using that feature.
That's
So
great.
if they can use this, if they can make this work right, then I think it'll be great.
That's great to hear. Yeah. Yeah, I think most sort of non-tech people that I know are still like, you know, 1Password for most sites. I don't mean 1Password the product. I mean they have one single password that they use for most sites, and like that's, you know, I think WebAuthn as a primary authenticator is really the most fundamental shift we've seen in authentication since the password, right? So like it's the thing that can really change this. And yeah, if Apple can help drive adoption, that'd be fantastic. For all the reasons, for all the properties of WebAuthn, right? Like anti-spoofing, you know, ease of use, all the things.
Make it easier to use. So
yeah.
I think that's the key.
Yeah. I suspect a lot of you are like me. Like after watching the keynote, you noted down all the cool stuff that you will personally use as a consumer, but will probably disable for your organization. Like I thought, what do they call it? Universal control, where you're dragging the mouse to your iPad and like, awesome. I'm going to use the hell out of that. I am going to disable that immediately for my organization, right? Like until we,
the biggest question is which organizations are going to allow the cloud builds for Xcode.
yeah, that was a great announcement, but I think it's it's intended for smaller shops, right? Like bigger shops probably already have their own CI/CD pipeline. I don't know, like, and even if I was a bigger shop and didn't have that, I think I would still be aiming to build and own that infrastructure myself. I don't know.
I think
Why do you say that?
I don't know. I think, well, first, I'm probably not only developing for Apple, and I want one path around all of it. And I don't know that I want Apple controlling that piece of my development. Again, if you're like a small shop and that's all you do, we make this iOS app. Perfect.
Sure.
Like super exciting. Like sort of in the same way, I think because of that, like one of the things I'm even more excited about is GitHub code spaces. Like that to me, I would use that. I think that makes a lot of sense. You can integrate it into your existing CI/CD. If you're going that way, to me, I think that makes a lot of sense. The Apple one, I would need to look at it, but I don't see like very large organizations adopting that.
I think like it will take a little bit longer for large orgs to adopt it, but it's it comes off as very attractive because like every org I know has a million Mac Minis in some form or fashion, either in their own colo or in something like Mac Stadium or now in EC2. And like there's the money problem of that, like it becomes very expensive, but it's also just like a logistical nightmare. It's like if all of our Macs are like managed, like they're one-to-one devices, there's so many assumptions we can make about them, except for these ones over here, which are kind of like servers, and like nobody really wants to deal with it.
Right.
So if we can take like our CI/CD for like Android and whatever and just keep running that like the way that we would want to, and have this one piece of like the iOS builds move to Apple's cloud, wonderful. We don't have to like as the 2014 Mac Minis start failing, like maybe we don't have to replace them. Maybe we don't have to figure out how to like have 1,000 managed M1 Mac Minis in a data center somewhere that like just upsets people.
I think you're right. Like I need to look at the implementation, which I haven't done, so I'm completely speaking out of ignorance on the topic. But I still like my gut reaction is that like I probably still want control over this. But you're right. If it can integrate with an existing pipeline or system, yeah, maybe it makes sense to shunt off the iOS stuff. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like I'm on the warpath right now around like people doing local builds, right? Like there's this thing with security or IT, like I'm developer, my builds are slow. What are you doing to my machines? Like, well, why are you building on your machine, right? Like this should all be like submitted to some service that just goes and does the build and signs centrally and does all the stuff for you, right? So if it gets anyone closer to like not having to do local builds, great.
Yeah, and I fully see what Sam mentioned, that in some organizations they have very regulated workspaces or Macs, and then there's this few built Mac Minis or Mac Pros, and they have all the exceptions, but they are not really under control, and it's just like it's a bit odd. And I sometimes I have the same feeling if I see how you log on this Colo Mac, and it's a VNC connection, And how often do you connect to that? Not very often, right? It's all automated, and you have your shiny GitHub Actions or whatever. But what's going on the Mac? Is this under the same control? Are the same tools are on there? I would put the tools on there, but I'm very sure not many organizations follow that direction because it's the build machine. It needs to have all the power. But yeah, who's looking at it?
Yeah, I agree with you that I would, for build machines, like, you still have some sort of insight into what they're doing. You have to. You can't just take a stock machine, chuck it in a closet, and say, "Hey, everybody, it's accessible." Turn on all the sharing options and say, like, "Yeah, have your way with it." Because they're building your products that you're shipping to your customers. So it's not a good strategy. What else? What did I miss from WWDC? What is the summary highlight for anyone here that you saw that you're like, well, if you take away one thing from what we've seen so far, you got to check out fill in the blank.
Apple reinvented MDM.
Except not for Mac yet.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree with you. Like, that section was so exciting until they mentioned like iOS only. Like, I don't know.
It's not just iOS only. It's iOS with BYOD.
Yeah.
So it's
and user enrollment only.
I have a big rant about this because the people who asked Apple for declarative management were the people who were like at large organizations using Puppet or Chef or whatever, and they were like, "We've been doing this for many years. We know how this should work. Please listen to us." And Apple listened to all those people, but started in a place where like none of those people care about it, and it's both really exciting.
Is there like an actual market being fulfilled by what they implemented so far, or is it just a test bed?
I'm in a chat room with other developers where MDM developers who work for like big companies, and they're like, you can actually do all the user enrollment stuff they announced without trying the declarative management. So the only people who are going to care to actually try this out in the next year is going to be like a couple of nerds who like to play with MDM.
That's the interesting part of this, because while iOS devices outnumber Macs, do the number of managed iOS devices outnumber the number of managed Macs? And that's probably no, would be just sort of my quick estimate. So they're sort of like impacting a smaller group to sort of like polish it and then hit like every Mac at an enterprise now is under MDM and all the management because you have to, right? It's the only way to do 50% of the work. So maybe that's the flip side to that coin. I don't know. I'm just making that.
I mean, it would be super useful. It's just like the thing that segment of the market cares about is like work profiles, and Apple didn't introduce that. They introduced this. They basically, if I had to summarize what Apple invented here, is OS Query plus Puppet, but MDM, and it can do everything that, in theory at least, like that those tools could do, as long as Apple gives you the right access to specific things. So
yeah, and I think you're right. Like the protocol changes are super exciting. Like stuff that feels like should have been there. Just like, oh, the client can acknowledge that they did something. Right on. Like I think that's all exciting and portend good things for the future. When this hits the Mac, I won't even say if. Like when this hits the Mac, there will be a lot of good stuff to take in. But you're right. Like, does that give them the right test bed? I don't know. But that would be my guess. Like affecting sort of a more contained subset versus like, okay, MacAdmin, with all of you use MDM, like we're making a pretty major change.
I mean, they also said both are compatible together, like in the same environment. So, like, the notion that it is just for a small, like, don't affect too many people is confusing. But yeah, like, Apple has not said who it's meant for, just that this is what they did.
Yeah. And of course, obviously, MDM vendors are going to have to update and get on board and do all the things. And, eventually, again, 8 years down the road or whatever, there'll be some announcement from Apple like MDM protocol version 1 is being deprecated. And, like, if you're still using this, stop doing it. So, yeah, we'll see. What else did we miss from the current announcements?
Swift, but I don't think anybody here.
Yeah, there was some interesting Swift announcement. I'm not super deep into Swift like I should be.
That's
No?
about it.
Sam-
I've been messing around with iCloud Private Relay.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. That's another thing, like, we're probably going to immediately disable, but sure.
I think it's super interesting how it works.
Sorry, what is it?
So it's basically like a VPN, like an anonymizing VPN, that you see a million ads on YouTube for. Except the key distinguishing feature of this is that they promise that it will not make your the ads for VPN clients on YouTube, it's watch Netflix from a different country.
Sure.
And then protect yourself online. So this is not the watch Netflix from another country. They say it will not enable any cross-border kind of things, but that because there are two parties involved, unlike some YouTube VPN, your traffic goes to Apple and then it goes to a third party, and so nobody can see your client IP plus the site that you're going to, which is super interesting. So like your device connects to Apple, and then Apple proxies the traffic to, so far I've seen Cloudflare and Fastly and Akamai and Level 3 as egress ISPs. But I mean, I think it's very interesting. I don't know how much practical security it gives you from your ISP kind of level. I wouldn't be super concerned about that, but I think it is much more of kind of a stab to online trackers, and that's who it's going to have the real implications for, is the fingerprinting, and not so much I'm worried about my ISP seeing my SNI and DNS requests.
Yeah.
But how it's implemented is very, very, very interesting, and I'm curious to see how it goes. Because when they talk about it, they say it's all traffic in Safari, and it's also all unencrypted traffic from any application, basically like HTTP traffic. So, how much of that still exists, but will it encompass all of the OS traffic in some future version?
Yeah, I think, was it you or someone else pointed out that currently it's exactly that. It's user traffic, root running daemons or something that reach out, just bypass this.
Yeah, I was like, I want to run TCP traceroute on, port 80 to somewhere and see how this traffic actually goes, but it doesn't work. I'm sure you could do that, but it was just it is very much to the user specifically.
And I missed part of that announcement when it first happened, and I kind of watched the back half of the keynote kind of quickly over my shoulder while I was doing other stuff. Was there a charge for this, or this is just going to be free?
So it's free if you pay for iCloud storage. So even the $1 a month one, And at least in the iOS and macOS betas, it was enabled by default.
Yeah, I'm sure they want that in the betas. Sure.
So I'll be curious to see if it is enabled by default in the release versions. But yeah, like if you're paying, I think it's $1 a month for like 50 gigs of space or Apple One or any of those things, like it's included. So
that's good. And again, I think this is a good general like boon for end users. And if Apple can sort of like pull everyone else into like better protection, it is interesting. Like it's kind of a VPN-ish, but you don't control the endpoint. Like very specifically, so Apple can get around saying like, yeah, we're enabling all this watch Netflix from some other region type of traffic. But to me, yeah, they're doing this exactly to like get around ad tech and trackers, because to me, a VPN is never for like privacy protection, all the things these VPN companies tout, right? Like you can still be tracked and all the things. It's useful for pretending you're plugged in someplace else.
Mm-hmm.
Plugged into the Office network. I'm plugged into Germany so I can watch German Netflix, whatever the case is, right? Like I'm plugged in somewhere else. That's useful. The Apple one is much more about like genuinely like shield your traffic from sniffers, and we're routing, we're doing our own small version of Tor so people can't track your IP address.
Yeah, the thing I'm honestly most curious about it is like from an internet engineering perspective, like you're going to have all this traffic going over it. Like, so in the Netflix example, you have ISPs like Comcast and like even like your mobile carrier have installed these appliances from Netflix and Apple, even like to, cache things locally so they don't have to leave the ISP network. And now all this traffic is going to leave that ISP network and, potentially be, traveling over multiple states or a longer distance.
Yeah.
So like there will be some performance impacts, either positive or negative, but like I've seen some of my traffic like egressing really far away from me, which increases some latency, and I'm sure it'll improve over time. But there's just like a lot more, every time like you reverse proxy something, you're adding another system and another network that something has to go through.
Yep. Maybe Apple will end up having those caches either in their network or, like you said, at one of these egress points of Cloudflare or Fastly or one of those, and they can hit some of those caching points that way.
Yeah, they're all well interconnected, so I haven't seen like bad performance.
Nice.
It's just very curious how it actually ends up like impacting global internet traffic with so many users.
And Sam, how would you compare this, for the average user in comparison to the Cloudflare, I think, how was it called, browser isolation, which of course is a different idea how they technically solve it, but what's your opinion on that?
I mean, I think this is a much better thing for a real user because it's still rendering everything as you would expect. Like if you're using Cloudflare browser isolation, that's like a remote rendered browser, and everything's claimed to work the same, but ultimately probably doesn't work the same as you would expect. Like I think for a normal user, you'll be able to turn this on and you'll never notice anything.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And again, if Apple can sort of pull people forward, great. Coming up on the hour, love sort of wrapping this up as we can. Any last minute WWDC things that like were mind blowing or you want to check out during the week?
Well, what's mind blowing to me is that I've only hit one bug at all. Everything works that I've tried. The only bug I have is in the music app. All of the columns, like you know, like if there's like a list in Mac OS and you like can right click and show and hide different columns, it's like one off. If you click one and actually like what changes is the one below it. So that's the only bug I have, but like all the software I care about works, so we're good.
Really?
You know,
Even
we can
work-
deploy to everybody. No bugs.
No, but work stuff is running, your endpoint agents and everything.
Same thing here. We only hit one bug, which when we looked at it, it was like, how did that even work in the first place? So there's no, anybody could install it if they wanted to today and have zero problems.
Wow. All right.
I
I've been holding off, so maybe I'll give it a shot. We'll see.
I was pleasantly surprised. Like I've heard from other admins that I work with, like it's been such a pain in the past, and this is my first like real big upgrade cycle that I've been responsible for, and it was basically nothing.
Wow.
I mean, knock on wood, because there have been problems in the past
Sure.
where things snuck in later betas.
Yes.
But
I was just going to say, like, you never know. This could just be, right? Like, we've
but
seen,
this one looks pretty good.
we've seen like, good, dip. Okay, we have to fix these things. Like, enough people have complained for GM. And
That's not to say like we haven't filed feedback, but like DEP just worked and my device got enrolled.
Nice.
All
I got to the
all the
desktop.
same old bugs are there, but there haven't been like new ones.
Yeah, I have hold off installing it this week, but I think next week I will do that. I think the major hold off was that new MDM features, at least a part of that is not on macOS. It's like, okay, well, why then this week?
Yeah.
But what's the expectation? Is this about to change within the beta so that incrementally macOS will get towards new MDM this year, or is it more no?
I don't think there's any indication of that. And they very explicitly said during that declarative management session, iOS only. Like
I don't think they would change that halfway through like WWDC.
Yeah.
They said it.
I feel like we'll get a preview in the spring or something.
Maybe.
Like, some of us will end up having meetings with Apple, and like they'll be looking for real feedback now that this is announced. But hopefully, by the spring we'll be able to test it. But I'm sure if it's not, like, next Mac OS will support it for device enrollment.
Cool.
There's a tiny little hint that we might get DEP provisional for Mac OS.
Oh yeah, we do get that. It's not even a hint; it's confirmed.
Okay.
But you have to use your iPhone camera to take a picture of the screen. Why that is, nobody knows.
Seriously.
Yeah. It's not with like Apple Configurator on your Mac. It's with Apple Configurator.
This is going to be great for people in data centers or provisioning Mac minis.
But also orgs where like it's hard to get devices into DEP from the get-go. This should make it easier, I think.
Yeah, I mean, my guess on why it is this way is because there's still a lot of Macs out there which don't have even a T2 in them. So getting those, like, those don't have any way to, like, go into DFU or whatever the mode is that would be needed to connect to Configurator. So that's my guess on why this is. Maybe you'll be able to put something in provisional DEP with normal Configurator as well, but this is, we've been asking for this for 4 years or 5 years or however long. This was one of the major reasons why we didn't do MDM forever. So I'm glad this is finally here.
Where, Sam, did you see this not written down but explicitly stated? Where was this, a session or a doc?
It's in some doc.
Okay.
I think it's also in like the managing Apple devices video.
Okay. Cool. Good to know.
It was such a great thing, and it was so brief that we forgot about it.
Yeah, so yeah, that's cool. Anyway, love wrapping up with conference talks. Obviously, we've been talking about a conference, WWDC, this whole time, but we have another conference starting tomorrow. I was going to say like a rising star in the Mac conference scene, but you know, a long time now. I don't know how many years Mac DevOps has been running, but 6, 7.
6 years, I think,
6?
or is it 7 even?
Yeah, it's a great event, and last year was its first year online only, of course. Heard great things about how Matt ran it, and the second online only version starts tomorrow, which I'll be attending, not speaking, attending, checking out the experience, hearing what people have to say. Henry, I know you're speaking, so looking forward to that. You know, a bunch of people are speaking, right? Ben Tom, like sort of, Matt does a great job of finding brand new people you've never heard of and mixing it with sort of like, oh yeah, we all know so-and-so from the Mac community. So that's a nice mix.
And I'm very happy that Hannes Hüttilein just made it to give a talk, because he's so seldom talking at conferences.
Yeah. I saw that in the speaker list, so that's great.
Yeah.
You know what he's speaking about?
I think monkey stuff. I do know that he has like 2 or 3 topics that he wants to pick from, and I have to look up actually which is the one that he picked finally.
Okay. Cool. I know I have to go try early tomorrow to figure out how to do everything. Like, I know there's a Discord channel that where everything streams. I don't know.
No, I think it's tomorrow. It's just Discord, and on Thursday and Friday you have a stream link, which is a regular. I don't know if it's streamed on YouTube or whatever, but this is a direct stream. And then you hop back to Discord for whatever the hallway track kind of things.
Okay, that's cool. I can deal with that. I feel like I signed up for Mac Deploy last week, which I loved the sessions. There was some really good info, good sessions. But even though I signed up for it, I just wound up watching the posted videos later because I couldn't figure out quickly enough how to like jump into the session at any given time. Like, I think each one had a new Zoom link, and I was like, I couldn't figure it out quickly enough, so I just watched them all later on.
I think that's the same at MacDevOps YVR, that they posted, but they posted at one location, and you have to just be in this, go back to this channel, and then get the new link.
Yeah, I'll figure it out. If it's, I signed up for the Discord thing, I have that working. I think I'll be okay.
Yeah.
So cool. And sort of like as we talked about, I think just before we started broadcasting, Objective by the Sea is going to be in person. I don't think there are any other like in-person events scheduled for this year.
Oh, Black Hat, I think.
It's a mix, I think.
It's a mix.
Yeah.
I've heard. Yeah. So I was talking about Mac sort of like specific conferences.
Yeah.
SummerCon, the oldest hacker conference in the US, they're doing a hybrid event where they will have some people. They're selling like tickets for the capacity of the venue that they're in, and then we'll also stream online. So that's an interesting way to handle it, I guess. Like I know MacAdmin had sent out an email to people who have attended in the past and prospective people asking like, hey, we're thinking about running this in, I forget what it was, October or something. Would you do that? And I guess based on feedback, they pushed off till 2022. I think 2022 will I'm hopeful that we'll get back to sort of like our regular cycle of attending in person, and maybe still needing to be a little careful or whatever, but I think we'll all be back in person. So, and I know I mentioned earlier, like, I feel relatively okay about taking a day trip, maybe some other trips in the U.S. Objective by the Sea is going to be in Hawaii, but man, that feels like I might as well be going to England, or I might as well be crossing a border, because for me it's like an enormously long flight, and it is off to a different landmass, so it feels sort of foreign. But we'll see. I assume you're attending that.
That's the plan.
That's the plan. Yeah, I'll have to see if I can get up the nerve to do that.
I was there during the last one when, that's when the people started scrambling for toilet paper. So,
Yeah, I think in the Mac world, it was the last live event run, and it will be the first live event after things open up again. So, hey, more power to Patrick. He's doing a great job.
I can't not go. Right?
I know Tim Perfett said he applied to speak, so we'll see. Getting the band back together. All right. Well, with that, thanks everybody. Loved hearing the thoughts on WWDC. Have a great rest of the WWDC week and Mac DevOps if you're attending that. And see you next month. Thanks.
Bye. See ya.